feel free to put your name and anything you want to talk about in the agenda. All right, we could probably get started, right? All right. Just as a reminder, this meeting's being recorded and it'll be it's being streamed live to to YouTube right now, and will be saved on YouTube after. And also, your participation in this meeting is an agreement to abide by the CNCF Code of Conduct. All right, cool. So before getting into any updates and whatnot, wanted to sort of see if any new folks wanted to introduce themselves.
Hi, my name is Matt Young. I'm one of the co-chairs for TAG Observability, and I'm in the process of launching in its early days a project called Landscape Graph, which is a data model that can inform some things that are interesting to this working group. So I'm planning to kind of lurk for now and just listen.
Would you be interested in maybe doing a presentation next week about
yes,
what
absolutely. But again, my first time here, and I'm sure you have an agenda. I can spend some time today, if you like, giving a brief overview, or I can do something more formal, perhaps next week, as you like.
Cool. Yeah. Well, let's see what we have on the agenda after introductions.
So, your migration, particularly, I have been excited by the cloud data ecosystem for quite a while, and I actually did my first PR to CNCF or dark security just yesterday. I look forward to contributing.
Cool. Thanks. Glad to have you. All right. I think that's everybody who's new. Does anybody have updates on any projects, anything that is on any of that sort of stuff? I'm gonna real quickly, actually, there is a short update. So I'm waiting for the questionnaire to be returned from the cert manager team. It sounded like a couple of the folks on the team got sick, so they haven't been able to answer it, but they are going to be answering the questionnaire. Figure probably have answers next week.
Yeah, quick update on mine. I don't think only so far I think Kyverno has put answers in. Not getting many hits on the rest of them, but I'll ping them again.
Yeah, and if you need any help, just I'm also down if they just wanted to, like, hey, do you want us to sit down with you for just like an hour and walk through the questions? I'm down to do that as well, at least for a couple of the initial projects, until we can kind of get that sorted out.
Yeah, and I think maybe this is an opportunity for folks to get involved, right? I think maybe does anyone wanna kind of take one of these projects and get in touch with the maintainers and maybe have a short like half an hour sit down with them, um, you know, talk about the survey and kind of go through it. Okay. I'll just reping them again, and then I will also I don't want to put emails in this document, so let me see. I don't know what the best way to share the emails of the people are in case people want to get in touch. I guess the best way is if you're interested, either put something in the chat or put something in the comments, and I can send over some emails if you want to get in touch with the maintainers.
Yeah, it looks like the deadline we wrote on the document was tomorrow. So we'll see. We'll see if people make it in the last second.
Yeah, maybe that should be the email. The deadline's tomorrow.
I told the cert manager folks they could have a little bit of extra time because I think a lot of them who were all I think working at the same company must have caught something or other because they were all
Oh
out
yeah.
sick.
Awesome. How many are we targeting to kind of like call this enough data points, like 3 projects?
Yeah, I think 3 probably makes sense because I think that gives us a reasonable amount of, one is the answers to the questions. Because I think the things that we're looking to kind of sort out is, right, we're trying to make sure that, hey, are we getting relatively consistent styles of answer to the questions? Like if folks kind of in the free form, like if one person just sort of, I'm sure we just want to make sure that it's consistent. Like if one person gives us something thinking the question meant this and another person gives us that, then we want to be able to clarify that. And then the other thing we want to do is we want to make sure that the questions are clear to the individuals. Like if multiple people are like, I don't understand this question, then we can clarify.
Yeah, sounds good.
Cool. Brendan, did you want to talk about the AFF thing?
Yeah, I think this is just kind of like a quick update. We are going to be presenting some of the AFF graph work in the Salsa meeting just following this. For those that may not be familiar, basically what this is we are creating a knowledge graph so that you can ingest all the supply chain or security and SBOM and all these related documents into the graph and be able to ask it security questions like, which software is using this particular vulnerable library? Am I affected by this vulnerability? Or, give me kind of like proof or evidence that this software that I want to deploy in my cluster has gone through all the necessary checks, has all the SLSA attestations and so on. So I guess I won't go too much more into detail here because we're going to talk about it in an hour. But I guess any questions about that?
I think it's good. Oh, go ahead.
After you.
I was just gonna say, hey, I think I hear it's pretty good. If folks are available in at 45 minutes or so, you should check it out.
Yeah. Sorry, Matt, go ahead.
I admit to being kind of new to many of the communities and actually to the CNCF outside of observability stuff fairly recently, but I'm actually looking at the calendar to see what's in 45 minutes. I'm not.
Oh, it's not a CNCF one, so let me
Yeah, it's OpenSSF.
link. Yeah.
Oh, super. Okay.
Let me paste the meeting notes for that one. This is the South meeting.
I guess in a nutshell, I'm super interested in what you're doing, and I can't wait to learn more. As I said, as part of this, taking the data that's part of the CNCF landscape and putting it into a graph data model using GraphQL as an interface definition language and API layer, both. I hope to provide the ability to kind of mesh or to work with efforts such as you're describing here, and or to do some just core correlation and analysis directly. But some of the subgraphs, if you will, that comprise the super graph that would be this landscape graph, or federated subgraphs, if you will, is targeting all packages, from NPM to pip to all the things, as well as databases out of NIST for CVEs and some of the other things that one would find in an SBOM or salsa definition. So I'm somewhat new to the existing prior art. And so most of my focus of late has been on a compositional model that will horizontally scale, that would allow coming to communities such as this and saying, hey, do you already have a data model that we could incorporate rather than reinventing wheels? So we could, where possible, just use open standards that exist, or provide graphy, if you will, versions of them that are suitable for the application of graph data science, for all manner of things. So that would be my interest. And I'm interested in collaborating and learning. Again, the project that I've been in the process of defining is actually quite nascent. Like it's me. So I'm doing sort of a broad look before I leap and seeing where does it make sense to fold into existing efforts and or contribute or collaborate or interoperate or what have you.
Awesome, and I think you're also using like basically the same stack as us. So there's gonna be a lot of. I think we're planning to use Neo4j as well as have a GraphQL interface.
Yeah, I'm kind of adopting OpenCipher as I haven't tried Redis Graph or dgraph yet as well, but I'm starting with Neo just because of the GraphQL library there, as well as some existing graph data science libraries and other things. But yeah, cool.
Awesome. I think the next agenda item is also mine. Should I go ahead with that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we've been having conversations with the TOC around what kind of like is our relationship with OpenSSF and like how's that gonna play out. And I think one of the things that we brainstormed was that maybe as a motivation of like getting more folks, because it seems like the OpenSSF kind of has a different reach of audiences as well, to be able to collaborate and kind of have this CNCF supply chain working group be cross-listed as an OpenSSF meeting, and figuring out what it would be for artifacts produced by the group, right? It would be would this be, I think this would be like organized led by CNCF, but then could be co-authored by OpenSSF as well. At least that's how we're thinking about authorship. Wanted to kind of float this idea around, hear what people think, hear any opinions they have or against it. Yeah.
quick question. So I understood trying to collaborate more, but I didn't hear what deliverable was this? Oh,
That we would just like list like this meeting under the OpenSSF calendar as well,
okay.
and have a little bit of like, oh, CNCF is kind of combining efforts with this. One of the CNCF working groups will also kind of we haven't worked out the details. I'm bringing this to the group first to get feedback before we go and talk to the OpenSSF. But I think it'll be along the lines of like, we're working on stuff that's related to OpenSSF. People in OpenSSF maybe also interested in participating. And so, maybe it'd be good if we get listed as part of OpenSSF working group, and have all basically the outputs of the group be co-authored by OpenSSF as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
So something else we might want to, I think that's actually a great idea given how much overlap there is in the supply chain stuff. I do wonder if we might want to do something like, and obviously we can work out the details, but maybe something like, every other week is the other, it's like one is just like, it's like, 1 week is purely OpenSSF and CNCF or whatever, and another week is the combined, just because I know that there's been some overlap here and there. And then there's also some things are like, hey, I want to focus purely on some of these seeing like cloud native related things. And then it's like, oh, I want to work more on the generic OpenSSF open source security thing. So I just want to be cognizant of that. But I think it's a good idea. And I also think I would like to see if we could do the same thing with the other groups like the CD Foundation, because the CD Foundation starting next week at this time is starting up their own supply chain working. I think they don't call it working group; they call it a SIG.
Is it actually at the same time as this one?
Yes.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. And I kind of like brought that up, and I guess none of them had like, oh, I wasn't aware that there was the meeting at this time. So I tried to kind of obviously coordinate with some of them, because I think especially with stuff like the Secure Software Factory and some of the other things that are coming out, we want to help coordinate, because also, as we recently discovered, the CD Foundation is also spinning up their own continuous delivery reference architecture. Granted, it's like not purely related to like security and supply chain security, but it seems like there's stuff there that's like, hey, if you're talking more about generic stuff, can we come in and at least present to you what we've been doing with the Secure Software Factory, so that when it comes to the security piece of the more broader reference architecture you're building, we can make sure that we're aligned, because obviously we want to make sure that as much as we can be, we don't want the CNCF to say you should be doing X, and then the CD Foundation saying no, you shouldn't be doing X, and then there to be a conflict there.
Yeah, I'll just say briefly that out of tag observability, I've engaged also with the GitOps working group over the last year-ish, year and a half, and it's come up a few times, in discussion in both of those venues, that there really is a need for an open standard around the reporting of state, deployments generally that come out of either GitOps or continuous delivery tooling, so that it could be correlated with observability data and other things, just as there's overlap for supply chain. So it's cool to see that in this venue as well, and lots of others, that that this is broadly usable. So it speaks to the potential for an open standard. That's
I'm curious, Matt, about like kind of like the mode of operation that you collaborate with these groups, because like I think what we found with like a lot of the supply chain groups is like it ends up being, they come to our meeting, we go to their meeting, and then we all have like 5 different meetings that we have to go to.
Yeah, so yeah, I'll say like I've raised it in both of those forums, and then I recall last time we talked about it last year and I'm not a formal member of the GitOps working group, but just kind of show up, or was through last year a little bit. And then someone from there was mentioned there too that there were efforts in the CD Foundation as well to define a standard around the same thing. So I've had some of the same experience as well, where there's been, again, my introduction to all of these groups was about 2.5 years ago when we started the tag for observability, but there's been a lot of discussion, and I think I launched back in April, or not launched, just started hacking away on weekends and stuff, writing things down on this landscape graph thing, just to kind of just do some things and just see if I could merge in with people, or if folks wanted to join in this effort that I'm in, or whatever. But I think shifting for a bias towards action, at least is where I am after having that similar experience, which isn't bad. I mean, people are talking, but I wanted to just do some stuff too.
Yeah, no, just getting like the communication and coordination is unsolved problem.
Yeah, but opportunity too, right? I mean, here we've got 3
Yeah.
different, right? There's CNCF for we're talking about here open SSF, as well as the CD Foundation. And part of this landscape graph approach is, if you go to landscapes.dev, those are like the Linux Foundation's landscapes plural. And from what I can tell, they all use the same underlying JSON input data model for those. So I was kind of hoping to do this like ecosystem graph for the landscape once, and at least be able to have all of those other landscapes addressed too. It actually forms a hypergraph in a way, because there's a lot of overlapping nodes that exist in multiple landscapes, or entities rather. When I started peeling back the thread, I thought, here again, like supply chain and SBOM and all of the both industry attention, but also huge gaps and needs, really across all of those landscapes. You have this concern around packaging and threats and just how to manage all of it, right? So I'm kind of hoping maybe SBOM here or there, but just as a particular concrete domain within this whole overlapping set of groups, that has a lot of potential, I think, to gain steam, as well as vendor resourcing, moving forward, at least the potential for it. So that again is why I've kind of in the last week popped up here and in tech security, kind of just to see if these are silly ideas, or if there's a better way to go about it. So,
Gotcha.
Would love to learn more.
Yeah, I think this is what the group as well kind of like discuss some of these ideas, and I think like looking forward to you talking a little bit more about your work. I'm not sure whether we'll have time for today, but if not, next week. I wanted to kind of circle back to this the cadence, right? So let's say we do this with OpenSSF. Like if we do it, let's say every other week versus like doing it monthly.
I think maybe because I think the difference would be like, do we want this group to be like coordinating between these different working groups who are doing their independent stuff, or do we want it to have like its own independent projects? Because if it has its own projects, I think every other week or something makes sense. If it's really just coordinating, making sure we're staying in touch, I think once a month makes more sense.
I think it's more on the first. The desire is more on the first, when we're actually like working on something together. Especially like even the stuff with supply chain compromises catalog, right? We had something, and then I think John is kind of like coordinating something. I'm part of that tiny group that's like looking at it, but it's like, we were working on some of this stuff. Now they're working on some of this stuff. Then like we're overlapping, but then we're duplicating efforts. one of the concerns is that like with the OpenSSF now, or when someone wants to be like, okay, I'm going to contribute to security, and then they're like, try to join the CNCF on tech security, OpenSSF, like they kind of want to work on, you know, more like emerging tech security, and so like CNCF is a good place, OpenSSF is also a good place. Then I think there is like a level of like cannibalization between the two groups. So I think trying to see if there's a way to you know, if people are part of OpenSSF, they can still participate in efforts that CNCF is working on without, you know, having to like bounce between different groups and so on. Still open problem. But I think between like to your second point, I think like in terms of like communication and coordination, I think we have like most of the group here actually is part of both sides of the coin. So I think we are good on communication and keeping it sync. So I wouldn't I'm not personally worried too much about that.
Yeah, I think I think I agree with you there, and I think on the every other week probably makes sense, something like that. Yeah. I think also looking at I think that the two both things are important, like coordinating as well as but I think the trying to do some of the stuff, some of the projects would be very useful, because like a lot of the projects even right now in OpenSSF are starting to, like, I don't want to say step on the toes of what we've been doing in the CNCF, but it's like, you know, some in certain cases people have been reinventing the wheel. And it's glad, I mean, it's a good thing to get other opinions. It's just that in certain cases it's like, oh, you did the same sort of work, you just called it something slightly different. But while also still, I think, allowing some time and effort to work on projects for you know, the individual organization. Like I know, like for example, with the questionnaire that we're doing, it's like, hey, some of those questions probably make most sense for CNCF. Like I could imagine something like, hey, the CNC, you know, we have something like a questionnaire that's a little bit more generic, and then it's tweaked for projects under the CNCF, under the CD, because there's going to be certain things, like I can imagine, right? Like if you were to send the same questionnaire over to the CD Foundation, the CD Foundation is mostly focused around CI/CD and build tools. The CNCF is mostly focused around cloud native things. OpenSSF is sort of trying to take that broad, like here's the whole open source ecosystem.
Okay, so I think an action item for this would be for us to talk to the OpenSSF, figure out how we want to run this, whether it's going to just be like, okay, you know, they'll list us as part of their calendar as like a sign of goodwill, and their members can also like participate in our meetings if they want to, or they want something more formal like co-authorship or certain deliverables that are being worked on with OpenSSF, or whether, you know, the question is whether they straight out want to influence the stuff that we do, in which that case, like I personally will push back on that.
Yeah. So my two thoughts are, I'm sorry, my 2 cents are, I think that there's I think most of the folks on this call still participate in OpenSSF at some level. You know, a bunch of us run a project in the OpenSSF, and there's Salsa and yada yada. I am curious to see, like I agree that like if there's things that we don't want folks just kind of come in and be like, great, now this is, you know, another group saying this is how you should do stuff. But I do think that I would like to see a little bit more coordination between OpenSSF and CNCF, because I have seen a little, and I'm not going to get into details, but like I have seen a little bit of like, oh, why don't you ask the OpenSSF about that? That's not really a CNCF thing. And it's like, well, it's a little bit of CNCF. Like, let's say it's 20% CNCF, 80% OpenSSF, but there's still enough for the CNCF to be involved. And like, there's also a, like, just to be blunt here, like it all rolls up to the Linux Foundation. So it's not like we're all like largely on the same team here. It's not like something completely competing here. And so I think with some of these things, like there's certain projects that I know we would probably love to see a little bit more collaboration with, right? Like for example, OpenSSF scorecard, right? Hey, I would love to see more projects under the CNCF use OpenSSF scorecard, because it's a generic thing that it's super easy to use. But where was I going with this? Yeah, I just think I think my focus would be on where can we like actually sit down and collaborate as with the strengths of both of our groups.
So I can take the action item to set something up for us to chat. I want to open this up to members of the community as well. If anyone's interested in kind of participating in this, I will create an issue. But feel free to say something now over there in chat, and then I'll keep that in mind. Cool. I think the next thing on the list is Fresco update.
Yep. So actually, that's a little bit related to what you brought up in the coordination between sort of OpenSSF and CNCF. So we've been doing, just wanted to quickly kind of go over. So we've been doing a bunch of stuff for Fresca, which is an implementation of the CNCF Secure Software Factory reference architecture, which falls under the OpenSSF now. The project does. And so we're doing a little bit of a refresh of the project to sort of make it clearer to folks what the purpose of the project is, right? Like the project just being, hey, it's a it's a suite of tools that are configured in a way to be secure by default, and then it's also a set of abstractions with guardrails so that folks who are building out pipelines can build out pipelines securely, and get like the tools that they need to do, that they need in order to be able to run secure builds with good defaults, best practices in mind, and like it won't let you do the wrong thing, unless you purposely try to break it, right? But like it won't let you sort of build insecurely, it'll do all the right salsa stuff. And so wanted to kind of probably next week or the week after, I might ask this group to maybe take a look at the new README that's coming out of it, just to say, hey, one is want to make sure that it's clear that like this sort of thing is trying to build, is trying to be an implementation of the Secure Software Factory. And then also, does it make sense to people what we're doing in there? Because I know one of the big pieces of feedback we've gotten over the past few weeks is like, I look at the README and I have no idea what this thing even is. And we want to kind of clarify that for folks. And that was really it.
Yeah, and then I think adding on to that, I think one of the pieces that was missing based on the reference architecture, right, is the runtime visibility piece. it's like that's still a missing piece in Fresca. So Shripad and I and I think Aditya from Intoto kind of like are collaborating on that basically to add in that missing piece. And we're looking at like integrating Tetragon into Fresca so that it has the ability to view, get runtime logs basically in terms of what's happening during the build. So in that process, basically, I kind of built out a POC in Chains because Chains is already there kind of as a watcher for the Tekton pipelines. So looking to see how as is running, as a pipeline or task run is running, capturing all those kind of events and creating another attestation on top of the Salsa attestation already getting created by Chains, creating another runtime attestation. So I'm in the talks basically with, I think the next piece is basically how should the predicate actually look like in terms of for runtime, right? What kind of information do we want to capture? And how, like what information is valuable to capture and what's missing currently that we do want to capture that maybe we have to go, we need to go upstream to Tetragon or some of these other tools and see, hey, maybe it's not capturing this information at this point, but we do want to see that being captured and maybe we can work on that. So if there's any kind of interest from the group, I think it's basically like we want to make a standard, runtime predicate on what information, what it should look like and how do we want to capture that kind of information. And yeah, if people are interested, I can do a demo later on or something, like see what it looks like and what we're kind of thinking and just see. I think the next step is basically, okay, what should the format look like for that attestation?
I have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are these attestations mainly for the runtime of the factory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So for the pipeline itself, right? So it's not, you're not observing all the components. Like, you're not observing Spire, you're not observing what's happening within all that kind of stuff. You're only observing what's happening during the build, during your pipeline, right? That you're kind of seeing, okay, is it reaching out to the internet? Is it doing something crazy that I didn't expect, right? Is it opening files that I don't expect it to open? So stuff like that, kind of capturing that kind of information. And then what do we want to see from that basically? So for example, like once we have that kind of information, we can probably push it into the graph. And what do we want to get out of that? So I think kind of answering those kind of questions and making sure that we have the data collected that we need to answer some of those kind of questions.
So a quick question on that: Are you using eBPF to capture that, or strace,
yes.
or like? Okay.
eBPF, yeah. So it's a tool called Tetragon.
Okay, yeah, familiar.
Yeah. So that's what we're using, and then basically it's just basically the concept is like from the POC that I created. Basically, it's just running in the background, and it's kind of integrated with Chains. And at this point, we're using gRPC, but I think we want to move off to like a Unix socket instead. But there's work that needs to be done in order for that to happen. But for now, basically, it runs in the background, and we just kind of filter in on a specific, whatever we want to look at, and collect all the logs, all the runtime, whatever syscalls and all the processes that are running, collect all that information, and then Chains has the ability to do signing and uploading to OCI and whatever else you want it to do, right? So just create a new, if you want to create the attestation, push it to whichever place you want to push it. So it'd be completely separate from the build time Salsa attestations that are getting created by default by Chains. It would just be a layer on top of it.
Okay,
so nice. I think
and
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, real quick question. You mentioned about moving onto Unix sockets off of gRPC. gRPC can work over Unix sockets. So
yes, that's what I mean.
Was that the idea?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. That's exactly what I mean. So right now it's just Tetragon is still very much a new project, right? They're still trying to figure out some of the things. So right now they're their gRPC is exposed, their API is exposed insecurely, right? They're not using any kind of mutual TLS or anything. So, they still have to get all that stuff cleaned up so that we have proper secure communication, right? So.
Yeah, and one of the nice things on Unix socket is you can pull information from the kernel to tell what is sending you the messages. So that's part of it's one of the nice things about using sockets. There is you can tie that in. So it's the same thing that Spiffy uses. Yeah. So when you say what's my workload identity, Spire, if you're using Spire reference implementation, it'll actually check that information as part of the process.
Right. Okay. Yeah, exactly. So I think that's what we kind of want to see is like, okay, what information can we get, and what do we want to capture in that attestation?
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and so just one quick thing. That piece that Parth brought up is the final piece that's missing from the implementation in order to make it compliant with the secure software factory reference architecture. Because remember, there was you need to have the pipeline framework, which we have, right? Tecton plus Kyverno allows us to sort of apply policies to pipelines. Then you need also the ability to do workload identities and those sorts of things so that you can verify that, so that you can control that builds are happening on the right nodes and that the pods themselves are not being tampered with. So that's the Spiffy Spire work. And then the final piece is the runtime visibility, which is can you start to look at what's actually happening in a build to make sure that stuff like people aren't trying to open up shells while the builds are running and mess with what's actually happening inside of the builds, as well as potentially dependencies that you're downloading. If those dependencies are bad and doing something weird, or the tools, the compiler, et cetera, are doing something weird, you want to have some sort of anomalous detection. Brendan?
Yeah, so a lot of those that we're talking about there, we're looking at basically documenting what we've done. So we're generating the attestations, we're signing stuff and saying this is what we signed. I'm wondering how much we want to look at controlling to make sure that we're signing good stuff and not just documenting that someone ran a malicious build through our pipeline and we just signed it on the backside.
So yeah, I think that's something I have been giving a little bit of thought to, which is it's kind of the monitoring versus observability question. One piece is the provenance and everything else doesn't tell you necessarily whether or not something's bad. It just says, this is what I ran. Could be a bad thing I ran, but this is all the stuff I ran. And I am telling you at least that I don't believe anybody lied about what got ran or run. And so I think there are two separate things here. I think the big thing that the secure software factory is trying to do is not necessarily state that this thing is good, but it is trying to say, this is exactly what I ran. But then in addition to that, I think we could just then apply normal good security practices to the pipelines and enforce that. And then say, great, because we're enforcing these other good security practices, plus the provenance piece, we can say, yep, I ran all the good secure build stuff. And the provenance is proof that I ran only the good secure build stuff. I think that's kind of what we're trying to do. I would love to obviously get more folks' thoughts on this, but I think it's kind of the first step is to get the provenance piece really, really solid. And then after that, we can sort of include all the security linting and the stuff because I know one of the things we would love to be able to do is also integrate with a little bit more with SigStore at a policy level, where you can sort of say, great, the only software I'm going to install in the build is stuff from valid identities or valid trusted identities in that we trust, and that kind of thing.
Yeah, no, just from looking at this in the enterprise side, part of the question is, okay, we've got this whole secure pipeline, but we want to make sure that we're not pushing bad code through it. And so where are those settings that the enterprise can tune and set so that the output of this doesn't get signed and automatically trusted by the next step? And so they're looking at where to put those controls, where to put those settings on there. How do we tweak something like Tetragon to say, hey, when you see us connect out to China, that's something bad. We need to restrict that. We need to, refuse that build or refuse to sign the resulting image. And so how do we put those controls in there, and where are those configuration settings going to be made? I think that's kind of an open issue we haven't looked at yet.
Yeah, so I think Tetragon does have the ability to enforcement, right? It has the ability to enforce whatever you specific things that you don't want to happen in your pipeline. I think it's still, so some of the things I kind of brought up the question to the Tetragon people is like, hey, I want to be able to, like one of the things we were talking about before is like, hey, I want to block, just being able to exec into a pod, right? If it's running or something, I don't want to be able to do that. Just block everything associated with that. So it took a bit of back and forth with them. Even they were kind of like, hey, how do I do this with Tetragon? So it's possible. I think once we have that, once it's a little bit more documented, I think once there's more documentation, especially for Tetragon in terms of how the tracing policies work, we can definitely set that up, and it can be part of, like the queue infrastructure that we're kind of creating. Have that okay, exactly what kind of policies do you expect? Do you want to push out into your pipeline so that none of this stuff is happening? So you want to catch all that. So I think once it's more fleshed out, we can definitely abstract, create a level of abstraction with queue and enforce those kind of things. And so this way, basically the attestation now from the runtime you're seeing is that, okay, you see that it's not doing any of this stuff, right? That's what you want to see. You don't want to see that, hey, it's reaching out to China. You can go check that. And we can do that with Kyverno, right? Kyverno has the ability to check attestations and validate the actual things internally. So you can go put policies in place that says, yeah, if you see that it's reaching out to the internet, then don't allow it to be, even though it's signed, don't allow it to be run in production. Yep, that's all I had. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's about it. Any other questions, comments, anything, other topics folks wanted to bring up? All right. If not, we can give folks back 10 minutes. Just a reminder, we're going to be doing the Salsa. We're going to be doing this AFF meeting in a couple of minutes here. So. All right.
Thank you.
See you next week.